I recommend a text that you put on the refrigerator and look at it every day. 1 Corinthians 9:20. Paul has a diplomatic way to go here. He says that he, Paul, will go to people under the law, to Jewish people, unconverted Jewish people, but they're under the law of Moses, as if he were. He'll go and keep the Sabbath with them if they really insist on that. But he then says that he himself is not under the law. I, Paul, am not under the law. Paul is a Jew, please note, a Benjamite, a former Pharisee. He is not under the law of Moses in the letter, but he'll do diplomatic things like going along with them to try to win them. So you're going to have to make up your mind in your particular situation. I would think there's nothing wrong at all in going to a Seder if it makes your family happy, although you should make it clear that you are not doing this out of obligation because Jesus is your Passover. And as Paul says in the next verse there in 1 Corinthians 5, we should be festivalizing every day, a present continuous tense in the Greek there. You're not keeping the Passover once a year. That's a Jewish thing. Colossians 2 is very clear. Don't let anybody tell you what to do. And by the way, it doesn't say let no man, so there's some particular point there. No, don't let anybody tell you what to do in terms of three things: weekly, annual, and monthly holiday, which are a mere shadow, gives the right idea. Now, people say, well, there you go. It means there are still shadows of things in the future. That doesn't work, because you'll note that Paul also said in another passage that Adam is a type of Jesus. That's a Hebraic way of using verb tenses, which we wouldn't use. Correct translation, that would be Adam was a type of Jesus who's come. So in Colossians 2, the correct rendering there gives you the sense is that that calendar, that trio of calendar events, Sabbath weekly, Sabbath monthly, Sabbath annually, they are, meaning in our terminology, they were a shadow of Messiah who has now come. Focus on Jesus, who is your Sabbath, who is your festival, who is your tabernacles. You do not need to be keeping those things, because in the letter, you're going back under the law of Moses. And Paul in Galatians warns you against severing your relationship with Jesus. It's a fearful thing. By substituting for the risen Messiah, who is your real spiritual energy now, by substituting for that, weekly, annual, or monthly holy days, observances, don't go there, unless it would be for diplomatic reasons occasionally. Now, he's willing to do this to keep people content. My personal opinion, with numbers of commentators, is that James was not as quick to get onto the more advanced view that Paul had. But Paul is certainly willing to circumcise the Jew, Timothy, because of the Jews. Very clear, Luke says. It wasn't because one had to circumcise. So there are two clear levels of procedure and activity here. Paul will do a lot of stuff. He will go and take a Nazirite vow in the temple. He's going to do something very Jewish. However, the real Paul, when he speaks of himself, is not under the law. Paul in Romans 14, listen to this, a Jew, in Romans 14, Paul says, I'm convinced that nothing is unclean of itself, unless you think it is. That's not supporting Leviticus 11 food laws. Those food laws are absolute laws. But that takes us, of course, to another very brilliant passage of Scripture in Mark chapter 7, where you have that brilliant comment, a parenthetical aside by Mark probably, speaking of Jesus, and Jesus talking about things going into the belly and coming out and so on, and making a very staggering point in Mark 7. In saying what Jesus said there, he was making all foods clean. That is what the Greek says in the best manuscripts, no question. So what we're seeing here is a process of moving from the law of Moses to the law of Messiah. It didn't happen in one day. Jesus, I have to tell you, was the mediator of the new covenant. If you say that Jesus just came to keep the law of Moses in the letter, you've done away with Jesus. You've done away with the new covenant. No, Jesus comes and he insists on being an adherent to the law of Moses at some level, but he then begins to raise the law of Moses to a new intensified form, even contradicting Moses in one part, according to the laws of divorce. So it's a process. You're going to have to think about this deeply. Jesus gradually then introduces the new covenant. If he doesn't do that, then Hebrews is false when it clearly states that Jesus is the mediator of the second renewed covenant, not just copying the law of Moses. Here's a good verse, John 1:17. John expressly says in a little remark that doesn't get nearly enough attention, the law was given by Moses, but what comes through Jesus? Something different. Grace and truth. There's a contrast there. He doesn't say the law was given through Moses, but Jesus then realized the law of Moses perfectly. That's not right. Grace and truth is not the same as the law of Moses. Therefore, Paul can say that Paul, is not under the law of Moses, 1 Corinthians 9:20, but he's entourad, the word there in the Greek, entourad to the law of Messiah. Without that distinction between Messiah and Moses, one's Bible study has fallen apart very seriously. So I would ask people to get this sorted out in their minds. We are under the law of Messiah, the Torah of Messiah, Hebrews 8:6. The new covenant is entourad on better promises. And what are those promises? The promises of the life of the age to come. So if you are stuck in the law of Moses, give this some serious thought, because you might be undermining the electrifying power of the new covenant, where Jesus said in John 6:63, the words that I speak to you, we might say the covenant words that I'm telling you about, are spirit and life. So if you want spirit and life, you're going to concentrate on the words of the life-giving Messiah through the words and teachings of the new second covenant, not the law of Moses. Don't mix them up. If, in fact, the Jewish Christians, are still bound by the law of Moses, Paul is the breaker of that. So 1 Corinthians 9:20 remains